All right, so this is going to be heavily edited because of the fact that I originally was going to be almost an hour long, and I had to cut it down for time because look at this thing, it's just freaking monstrous. There's a lot to talk about, so I cut out the review section of it, and then I just moved right into it, keeping only the pertinent parts to what my overall final thoughts were. All right, cool. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my community show. So styling. Anyway, this is, of course, as you've probably guessed from the title, the final thoughts and review of The Last of Us Part 2. I have just recently finished the series. Yeah. So, yeah, as always, let's do our announcements first. So, I have been playing through the DreadX collection, The Hunt, and I'm going to be finishing that up in the coming week. And then I'm going to be starting up DreadX Part 3 because I was planning on saving that for Spooktober, but since I'm playing through 4 now, I might as well play through 3, right? But after that, I'm going to be shifting gears for a while because I want to get all of the Borderlands videos or all of the Borderlands games done. So yes, I am going to be playing all of the Borderlands games from 1 to 3. I've already played Tales from the Borderlands on the channel, and while I have parts of 2 up, I'm going to be taking those down because, as I've mentioned before, they are, me and my daughter playing, and it's kind of iffy with the YouTube structure and everything. So that series is going to be going away, and then I'm going to be starting from scratch with Borderlands 1, then the pre-sequel, then 2, then 3, and yay. And I'm kind of excited about it because I love Borderlands, and it's been so long since I got a chance to play it. So, bear with me for a while because it's going to be heavy Borderlands. And, yeah. I'm excited about it, though. Also, I'm going to be doing my best to be kicking up all of my side series, i.e., quick looks, demos, the I need a new job series, etc. You know what I'm talking about. All the little side projects I do, as well as working on, again, going back to the larger projects that I've been planning for the longest time. Apart from all that, that is it for the announcements. So let's move into the topic for today. My final thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2. So, first of all, quickie review. The Last of Us Part 2 was a storied tale of love, loss, and vengeance. And as I've mentioned in previous accounts, as in the series itself, and in a video in this series about I don't like vengeance stories, but that was what the game was, and that was what I had to deal with. Now, apart from that, I have to give credit to the writers. It was fairly unique, and I'm proud of them, and kind of like I got to give kudos when they try to do something different in that it tried to present the story from two sides, i.e., you move through the first 2/3 of the game as Ellie seeking out Abby for vengeance. Got to squish her for what she did to our Joel. By the way, this video is going to be riddled with spoilers, so, but I figure if you clicked on it, then you kind of expected it to be. So, bear with me. With our lead protagonist there, Ellie, being the new main character, and I kind of called that, as it were, at the beginning of the game, because I was like, this is Joel. Last game was Joel's game. This one is Ellie's game, and in order to do that, they're going to have to do something that takes Joel out of the picture. And given that it's The Last of Us, I was not surprised that Joel died, because, well, that's kind of how these things work. Ultimately, we find a young lady named Nora in a hospital they start to show you that this is where the story starts to show you that they don't particularly care about Ellie anymore, other than to make her a villain. And that's part of one of my biggest peeves about this series, this show, this game, is the idea of turning Ellie into a villain. But they demonstrate it fairly effectively in a scene in a hospital where, she basically chucks Nora into spores and Nora starts to change, and And Ellie's like, hey, I need its information. I can make it easy on you, or I can make it hard on you. And it's implied that Nora dies, which, would be a blessing considering that she was either going to die or turn into a runner. And, well, it's a fate we don't really want to wish on anybody. And, yeah. There is also an instance where she gets to meet the Seraphites, who are an additional faction within the realm. Semi-religious anti-tech nuts. Semi-religious, I should say, religious semi-anti-tech nut jobs who believe and worship in this one lady who we never get to meet, which I thought was very unfortunate because I would have loved to meet her. And mostly bow types and melee types, but they've also got some rifle users and pistol users, but only the warriors are allowed to use those. Ellie ends up taking an arrow in the chest for it, and it sucked because then you have to pull that arrow out and introduces a new mechanic to the game. The Seraphite section was fairly unimportant when it came to Ellie's story because they'll play a larger part in Abby's story because they are the rivals and enemies of the WLF. Owen gets shot in the heart, and that was pretty great. And then Mel attacks, and Ellie knocks her down, stabs her, kills her, and then goes up to Owen, and Owen's like, she's pregnant. And then Ellie's like, oh no, I killed a pregnant lady. And then she throws up, and it's great. That's when Abby shows up, and she pins down Tommy, takes him captive, and as Ellie and Jesse run out to see what's happening, Jesse gets dropped like a sack of potatoes, and boom, no heroic death, nothing. Probably one of the more redeemable characters in this show, in this game, and he's just dead like that. Shot in the face, dead. And Abby's like, I let you live. All of my friends are dead. Never mind the fact that I'm an idiot and shouldn't have done what I did in the first place. It's all your fault. Then we cut back to the past where we find out that the one character that you were forced to kill in The Last of Us Part 1, the Doctor, is the whole reason this whole kerfuffle has begun. And Abby was the daughter of that man, the Doctor, who was going to kill Ellie to save humanity. Of course, argue whether or not that the world deserved it, because, looking at everything that's happened in the series so far, it's fairly easy to say. It's fairly easy to say just let the whole world die now, because nobody really deserves anything. They cut back to Seattle Day 1, rewinding in time a bit to find out what Abby's been doing this whole time. And interspersed are a few flashbacks of Abby's life before her dad was killed. And, you get to meet some of the characters from her group and kind of see their interactions. And this is a whole humanizing arc, and that's one of those things that, kudos to the authors or the writers, because they were trying something different. The unfortunate part is it falls a bit short because of the simple fact that, one, the lesson being even they are human, and two, the characters, you barely get any chance to actually get to know them. So, whatever pre-established ideas you may have had are the stronger ones in your mind. So, if you didn't like one character, you're probably not going to like him by the end. My example being Manny. The only slightly redeeming quality of Manny was that he takes care of his father. Everything else about him is he's just a scumbag jock dude, bro. I don't really like him. Go away. And, of course, Abby wants to find Owen. Turns out Abby and Owen have a history where they used to be smoochy types. They kiss each other. Of course, you find out that Owen's been kind of skimping out on everybody lately. His own guilt at what happened in Jackson overriding and riddling him with so much nonsense. She met up with two characters, Yara and Lev, and were actually two of the Seraphites, and they're outcasts. Turns out that Lev is actually a trans boy, and Yara, being the sister, is also exiled for that. And of course, we meet them in possibly the worst possible way, where Abby gets strung up by the Seraphites, and then Lev and Yara end up saving her, but not before Yara's arm is smashed by a hammer. Kudos to Lev. Lev is going to be easily my favorite character throughout this entire game. Finds out Owen is trashed and taking out all the problems of the world on himself and being a general idiot. And then after a bit of a back and forth, they do a little bit more back and forth, if you catch what I'm saying here. Which, I'm not cool with because, on top of one thing, he's abandoning his family. On top of another, he's cheating on his family. So, woo. I didn't like Owen at the end. He was a weak man. She's like, oh, she's got compartment syndrome, got to cut her arm off. It's like, no, Yara. And, well, heights. Ugh. Didn't go very well. Isaac is like mad at you for now, for, abandoning your post, going AWOL, and you get captured, Abby gets captured, and then Nora helps you out, takes you down to find some medical supplies, where you get to face one of the biggest, nastiest infected you've ever seen, called the Rat King, apparently, and he is, oh my god. Yara gets her arm cut off, and Lev steals a boat, heads back to his island to go find his mom. When you go, you and Yara head out to go stop him from being stupid because Mom is a religious nut and whatnot. And so you get there to the island, and Isaac being the leader of the WF, I don't think I said that. Isaac launches a war against the Seraphites. Lots of fire, death, and destruction. And back to the aquarium where you find the aftermath of Ellie's dealings, i.e. the dead dog, the dead Owen, and the dead Mel. Tommy tries to get stupid, gets shot in the face, luckily survives, and shot in the back, by the way, by an arrow. Luckily he survives. I don't know how much I feel about that being luck, but, he survived. And then you have to face off against Ellie in a very, very interesting fight, because I've often thought in my head about how I'd like to fight some of the characters in my games, face off against my team in Final Fantasy, face off against blah 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 in other games where you've increased and improved your characters, and this game actually gave it to me, and I was like, that's neat, I like that. Then Abby's standing above her after tromping her and says, if I ever see you again, you're dead. And she and Lev take off. One of the biggest reasons I hate vengeance stories is because it makes even established characters who have been proven to be smart, it makes them dumb. Dude sucker punched Lev, and I was pissed about that. Like, dude. I mean, granted, Lev was, shooting them with arrows, but still. And you get a submachine gun, which that one or the crossbow actually turned out to be my favorite guns in the entire game. Find out what the pillars are. The pillars are actually where they strap up their more rebellious prisoners and force them to die in the hot California sun. Abby's like, dude, I ain't doing this no more. Y'all stupid now. I just want to get out of here. And cue the final moment, proving to us that the developers of the game really wanted Ellie to be a villain, where she holds a knife to Lev's throat, Lev being completely passed out, and challenges Abby to a fight. Abby being severely at a disadvantage here, being sick and dying, from sunstroke, heat stroke, and all that, emaciated to the point where all of her muscles are gone, and she's barely able to hold herself up. Oh, but we stabbed Ellie in the ribs, so therefore it's an equal fight. No, it's not. I'm sorry. Who knows how long it's been since Abby ate or drank anything, but it's an equal fight. No, it's definitely not an equal fight. I could see what they were trying to go for there, but it wasn't. Ultimately rounds off the entire show by saying, by kind of vaguely showing her abandoning her old roots. Now, I say vaguely because I think that's what they were going for, but it was fairly obvious. She left the guitar behind and then walked off and left everything behind. Now, of course, it was just vague enough that headcanon in my head can say that she went back to Jackson, tried to find Dina and JJ, and tried to fix her mistakes. And then later on, she learned how to play the guitar left-handed, because yay. Whew. 28 minutes just to sum up this game. All right, well, apart from that, so that was the review. Now let's go on to the final thoughts. First of all, I very much, very, very, very much loved how this game evolved control wise. Now, I've seen people complain that, oh, it's just rehashed, Uncharted rehashed The Last of Us, and it's like, well, they improved everything, for one thing. For another, it's a third person game. What more do you expect? Were you expecting it to be more like Batman? The controls were vastly improved from the last one, but in subtle ways, because honestly at this point there's not really a whole lot more we can do to make the game work better. But the stealth was improved. They added tall grass, they added new different weapons. Obviously you still had the bow, the rifle, the pistols, but in this case you also had like Ellie got an SMG, Abby got a hunting pistol, she got a crossbow. Again, crossbow and the SMG were some of my favorite games, or favorite weapons in the game, and they were awesome. They added some new mechanics, i.e., the long grass. If you crawl through it, you're less likely to get seen, or than if you're crouched in it, than if you're standing. And so, like adding new levels of stealth to it. They also made the combat a little bit more smooth. I know in the beginning of the game I had a lot of issues with it, because of the simple fact that I had that controller input and the screen was all blurry and everything. But once I finally got the capture card and was able to get onto that then it just became so much better. But anyway, apart from that, the combat was much smoother and everything. So I really liked that. They really vastly improved the structure and everything of the core mechanics of the game, crafting, and everything is held back but improved. I wasn't a fan with how limited the growth was. I feel like because they had two separate characters that they had to sacrifice a little bit of that, you know, because with Joel in the Last of Us 1, it just felt like there was more to improve, and in this case you had to unlock some trees rather than starting off immediately with those trees unlocked. And I wasn't really a fan of that. I know it adds a layer of challenge to the game, but honestly, it was a kind of moot challenge. But at the same time, it wasn't too awful bad. It was just not my preferred way to do it. The enemies, I love the fact that we got new enemies in this. Now, first of all, there are the standard runners, clickers, bloaters. There are the standard bandits, the armed humans. And for all that, they are all back, but we have two new infected and a new human problem. Now, of course, you can say there's four new infected. There's the stalkers and I'll still never remember what they were called, but the big pus bags that explode with acid. And then for the humans, we had the tanks. And then also we had the Rat King, and the Rat King had the stalker and the bloater variant, who were actually together and then they split. And then, of course, there was the wall lurkers. And I hated those guys, but at the same time, I loved it. I loved the new additions to the enemy roster. That was so cool. Added a new layer of difficulty, made you have to plan things a little bit more. Of course, there was still the option to just tank everything with a shotgun, but at the same time, if you want to do it right, if you want to do it like careful, it added a new layer of interesting, because like the stalkers were invisible to your hearing and would just hide until they found that they were comfortable attacking you. So essentially they made you a bad guy in the game. And the tanks on the human side, I kind of like what you were aiming for, but I don't think it paid off nearly as well, because they didn't feel too overpowered. But at the same time, I know they're humans just like everybody else. One shot to the dome and they're dead. Except in this case, the tanks weren't like that. So, like, it took me a couple of shots to the head to actually off one with the pistol. So at the same time, as while I see what they were going for, they were kind of more of an annoyance than an actual improvement. But at the same time, I do like variance in my enemies. So it's like, oh, she's coming, pew pew pew. Then we got the tanks coming out with their big old hammers, like, oh, I'm gonna smash you. I like that. Exploration was upped in this game too. I really like that. Opened up Seattle a lot more to you and gave you lots of different places to explore, rather than the semi-linear path that was in Last of Us One. Last of Us Two had open areas, like huge open areas that were so awesome to explore. But at the same time, this one definite positive because I love the fact that there was a lot to explore, but there was also a negative in that a lot of the time I wasted time exploring nothing. Now I'm not expecting everything to be just thick with lore, but I do like it when I find things. That's kind of my thing. I like exploring. I'm weird like that. He's so cool, but at the same time, it wasn't too awful bad. It was just a little inconvenient when you spend a lot of time searching and find absolutely nothing. You know what I mean? But core mechanics and improvements aside, The Last of Us 2 did exactly what you're supposed to do with a sequel. They took the original and they improved it. They took everything that made the original good, from the mechanics to the stealth to the zombies to the exploration to all that stuff, and just upped it. And boom, kudos on the gameplay. Gameplay in this game was a lot of fun, and probably the most fun I've had playing a game in a while, as far as the gameplay was concerned. But of course, we cannot avoid this topic here. I have to talk about the story and my feelings on the story. I mentioned at the end of the game that I felt that this was a bad story told well, and I stand by that. The writers and people who had a hand in and making the story of this game, they did a phenomenal job telling a horrible story. And I don't mean horrible in that it just had bad, like elements to it, i.e., vengeance and blah blah blah. But there were definitely a few parts that should not have happened. I mean, for one thing, the characters from The Last of Us One are suddenly struck with a stupid flu and have to act dumb in order to make the story work. And I hate that sort of thing. That is like, I wouldn't say it's a plot hole, but it's definitely a plot convenience. And I don't like it when people do that to their characters. I, for one, being the writer that I am, have always taken great care with my characters. I don't. They're dynamic in the range that they're human, and you gotta expect them to be human. But I don't make them act outside of their own nature. Now, of course, you throw in a mix like a tragedy, i.e., somebody's dead, and that tends to spur a little bit against your characters. So it's like seeing Ellie get hot headed and blow up is not outside of her character. But she's also not an idiot. So she's not going to be pursuing this entire story to the length that she did. Now, the thing is, they tried to sell it as Ellie sees these people as villains. And that kind of works. Because Nora, the whole situation with Nora in the basement of the hospital, Nora was to her an enemy. But you made Ellie to be cruel. Again, like I said, you built her up to be the villain. Now, unfortunately for you, it falls short because we played an entire game with Ellie and Joel, and we know that Ellie is not a bad person. She may not be 100% good, and nobody in this apocalyptic scenario is 100% good, except for Dina and Lev. But no. But she's not evil. But you made her to be evil. You pushed that idea on us that Ellie is evil. And that was wrong, because she's not. Which means you had to manipulate and destroy her established character in order to make her this way. And I love my characters. And the characters that you've made in this game are really good. the problem I have is that they don't work in the grander context of the Last of Us series. They don't work like if you played The Last of Us 1, then Ellie's character does not work for this game. Moreover, I got what you were trying to do with the whole train changeover with Abby, taking the reins of protagonist, as it were. But it's too little too late at this point. You know what could have saved this, though? And I've talked to my brother about this. I've talked to Bubble Ninja about this. But this should not have been The Last of Us Part 2. This should have been The Last of Us Part 3. Or, additionally, this should have been The Last of Us Part 1. Because Abby did not have a chance to be a good guy, as it were. What should have happened was Joel and Ellie's story could have played out naturally and normally up to the end where, boom, Doctor's dead. And then we could have episode 2, or part 2, be Abigail and her father play out throughout that until, boom, Abigail's dad is dead. Now, the way it played out really well was that Joel, when he killed the doctor, you had no idea who the doctor was. So he could have been anybody. He was just nameless character number 21 of all the people you'd killed in that game. And on Abby's side of things, you could have seen how loving and wonderful her father was. And then, depending on how you want to do it at the end, you could just full out reveal it, or you could have it play out until the point where, she finds out her dad was killed by this stupid straggler dude. Then, cut to this game, where it starts off with Abby and Ellie playing separately, like you did, up to the point where she kills Joel, and you're like, dude, what the F? And then you're like, oh, that doctor, that was Abby's dad. Oh. And then the fans and established players of the game would have been like, but who's in the right here? Because now all of a sudden we have this entire backstory of love and adoration between Abby and her dad, but we also have Joel and Ellie. Oh. Then it would have been a moral conundrum. But in this case, Abby never had the chance to be the good guy. She was immediately the villain. And then you're like, oh, but look, she's nice. See, look, she had this time with her dad. Look, she's nice. She had this time with Owen. Look, she's nice. She's saving this little trans boy. She's a good person, I promise. No, we don't see that. We see the bad. And she's part of a bad group. She's from some bad people that were going to kill our Ellie in the previous game. So she never really had a chance to be the person you wanted her to be. She never had... There's an imbalance in the dichotomy. Because Ellie had this entire story with Joel, and Abby is an afterthought. Like I said, I see what you're doing, and I see where you're going with it. Unfortunately, it fell a little short. The other option would have been to be able to opt out of playing either Ellie or Abby. I personally would have played both because, that's who I am. I like the complete story. So that's my ultimate feelings about the story. Like, even though it was a bad story, it was very well told. Y'all did a great job on getting it done, getting it to the end. Now, it did obviously involve a lot of stuff I didn't like. I've had people describe the game as groundbreaking, and it changed the way they think. Calling out my buddy there. To me, it didn't change anything. It fell enormously flat for me, and I think there's two reasons for that. Because one, the ultimate theme, the idea about vengeance is bad. People are complicated, and there's no strictly good or bad people in the world. They're just people. All fell really short for me because I understand. I already know that. So, when you try to tell somebody something that they already know, it just comes across as condescending, especially when you try to force it on them. And it's like, okay, I already know what you're trying to say here. Plus, at the same time, You had to really seriously course correct your character, Ellie, and to turn her, you know, into somebody you could side with or side against, as it were. But unfortunately, you went too far off the rails and took Ellie and turned her into a monster. You made her evil. Even though the lesson was that people are complicated and there's no truly evil or good people. The thing about it is, I understand PTSD. I understand it to a degree that people who've never experienced it will never understand it. And to push this idea on us that the reason Ellie did what she did was because she had to find a way to deal with her PTSD is wrong. Now, granted, there's a lot that I have access to that Ellie would not have. But at the same time, if she loved and cared for Dina as much as y'all try to make us believe, she would never have left Dina and JJ. And as such, the thing I hate about Owen is the same thing I hate about Ellie now. And Ellie has lost all respect from me because of what y'all did to her. Owen, I didn't like him, and I was okay with not liking him. At first, I'm like, oh, he's the voice of reason. I like that. That's pretty cool. And then I find out he abandoned his family, started drinking, and basically threw his entire life away because of something that he was not able to stop. Okay, I don't like him anymore because of that one thing. He abandoned his family. Turn around and Ellie does the exact same thing for selfish reasons. I don't like Ellie anymore. I don't like Abby. I don't like Ellie. And I joked about it at the end of the game. As long as Lev lives, I don't care. And as much as it was a joke, it's very true. I loved Lev. Lev was my little buddy. I had to protect him no matter what. And you totally screwed up your main characters, and that's one thing I didn't like. Now, I really liked the dynamic characters. It's far too often, these days especially, that characters are often portrayed as one-dimensional. Oh, this guy's the jerk. Oh, that guy's the hero. Oh, that guy's the villain. Oh, this guy's a butthead. Often it's portrayed way too open that all characters are one thing. But in this case, we had a bit more of a dynamic. Obviously, I still wish that like we'd have seen more of Abby's friends, because that could have helped to establish what you were going for. Because as it was, most of her friends were still one-dimensional characters. Like Manny, even though he took care of his father, he was still a womanizer and disrespectful. And, to the point of spitting on Joel. Because, take out your enemies all you want, but do not disrespect them, as it were. And then Owen and Mel. Mel is not an idiot, but she was treated like trash by Owen and Abby. And I didn't like that. It's like, I kind of, like, even though she was all for going to kill Joel, you got to kind of look at it from the other side. Whereas we do see how Joel was a good person, or to a degree a good person and whatnot. All they saw was that this crazy dude who was supposed to deliver this little girl ended up killing the doctor and stealing her. For whatever reason. We don't even know, really, but, evil. Looking at it from their side, it's a completely different story, and I would have really loved to see that. But unfortunately, like I said, there was not enough time with Abby for you to actually establish that sort of thing. I didn't really hate Mel at the end. I saw everything that she was coming from. She saw Abby as not only, an idiot, but also saw her as a threat to her family. So her deciding that Abby couldn't go to Santa Barbara made sense, and so I wasn't against her for that. Owen, on the other hand, because of his choices, even though I understand where those choices came from, I cannot in my own way, ever come to terms with saying, okay, he was all right, because he abandoned his family, and that's just one thing I'm not kosher with. But overall, I would give this game a 7. Yeah, 7. 7 out of 10. I'm definitely gonna play it again because it was an interesting and very open world, very dynamic characters. I really love the way you made your characters. Even if I feel like you screwed them over, you really made some good characters. Yara and Lev, even though, you know, the first time I'm meeting this kid, and we go on a trek across the city, and it's like, oh my god, this kid is awesome. I love the whole naivete, coming from the Seraphites and whatnot, not knowing how things work, and then Yara being the protective big sister, you know, heroic in her own way. God, what a way to go. A lot of your characters got screwed out of epic heroic deaths, but Yara got a good one. Took out Isaac with a shot. That was awesome. And then died in a hailstorm of bullets. But, I love the way I loved all of your characters, like just how dynamic they were. Even if I didn't like the character, just oh, it's so good to see sometimes complex characters. My God, what am I thinking, right? And for a vengeance story, I'd say this is probably one of my favorites because of the simple fact that you tried something different. And while it fell flat with me, I'm sure a lot of people did like it. I do not feel that this game deserved the ridicule it got. I do not think that the people who worked on it, I mean, I never think that people who worked on something deserve death threats, but I definitely don't think it deserved the criticism that it got. People just had to take sides, and in this case, they took the wrong side. But at the same time, I also don't believe that it deserved all the praise that it got. Like, it should not be touted as one of the best games of 2020. Because while it was good, it didn't live up to the original, and there were other stuff that came out in 2020 that I feel might have been better. However, I cannot, in good conscience, ever say that there was not an attempt made. And, with all the characters and stuff. Oh, there was one other thing I wanted to mention. There was a true villain in this story, though. And it's not who you're thinking of it. See, the true villain of this story was Abigail's dad. Hold on. Let me break it down for you, right? What do you think would have stopped all of this from happening? Give you a second. See, Abigail's dad broke the key tenets of being a doctor. Number one, being do no harm. He was going to kill Ellie. Now, having been a doctor when the world was still alive, presumably, having been a doctor when the world was still alive, he would have also been subject, face hitches, he would have also been subject to the the rules of treatment, i.e. the patient bill of rights. And one of those bills of rights is the right to informed consent and the right to refuse treatment. Now, of course, understandable. This is the only immune person we've ever met. So, this, if we don't get this done, then, well, we're kind of screwed, right? But the one thing that would have saved all of this from happening would have been if he had talked to Ellie initially. If he would have let her recover from the accident, get back on her feet, and then talk to her, she would have agreed to the surgery. She would have died in the process, but she would have given her life for the greater good, as it were. As much as I don't think that we should have saved the world, because this world is evil and a lot of bad people in it, she definitely deserved the choice, but the doctor never gave it to her. Instead, opting to just do it. And because he didn't say anything, Ellie never got the chance to explain to Joel that it was what she wanted, and that he didn't get the chance to say anything. And Joel, being blindsided by this, of course exploded on him. Oh my God, they're going to kill her. They're not even sure if this is going to work, and they're going to kill her. And he goes crazy and starts killing everybody. So Abby's father is the true villain of this story. Because if he had followed protocol, Ellie would be dead, yes, but she would have given her life as she wanted to the greater good. That's just a theory. A steps theory. Thanks for watching. But anyway, apart from all that, that's going to be it for me for today. Definitely a 7 out of 10. I still recommend you play it, even if you're not into the whole idea of it. Because, well, if you're going to suffer, mind you, I'd say stop. Don't play. But the gameplay itself makes this game, it really carries this game. Even if I feel like the story fell flat, even if I feel like they had to, they had to mess with the characters in order to make the story work, I still feel like the gameplay definitely carried it. The characters are interesting and dynamic. The world is, as always, beautiful and interesting, and there's a lot of subtle, hidden environmental storytelling points in it. So definitely a 7 out of 10. Still recommend you play it. I love the fact that you took a chance on something. Anyway, so apart from all that, that's going to be it for me for today. Thank you all so much for joining me for this episode of The Community Show. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, go and poke that like button for me. If you'd like to see more from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And of course, as always, you're more than welcome to leave a comment in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And when I can, if I can, you know all that jazz. And tune in next time for another topic and another time. And until then, good night.